Hey Mac, how's it hanging? Welcome back to another episode of Mitchy's Science Theater. Today we will be going to the not too distant past. The prehistoric past, in fact. Today we will be talking about Season 5, Episode 6, Eegah. Now, if you haven't seen my beginner's guide to Mystery Science Theater, I would say that I made it very clear that my all-time favorite era of the show is the Joel era. Not to say that I'm not a fan of the other eras, I enjoy the entirety of the show. However, I just have a personal preference for the Joel era. Something about Joel's sleepy demeanor and dry delivery hits home with me. I don't know, man. Joel also tended to be a little less mainstream with his humor. With that being said, a great episode for not only newcomers to the Joel era, but also newcomers to the entire show is Eegah. Not only was this episode the birth of some classic MST3K recurring jokes, but also it's probably in one of the strongest seasons of Mystery Science Theater 3000 out there.
Well then, grab hold of your socks and read on, Joel Robinson.
Because it is time to look at Eegah. Eegah is Encino Man, but with a violent, non-stoner caveman. Well, Eegah is definitely funnier than Encino Man by a long shot, although that bar is not high, to say the least. The premise is silly enough. A silly old man, Robert, goes out to look for the caveman Eegah after his daughter Roxy explains her sighting of him, after nearly hitting him with a car. However, when Robert does not come back from his journey, Roxy and her boyfriend Tom go looking for him. Eegah, of course, gets the goo-goos for the female lead, as most horror movie beasts do. And then he follows them back to humanity because, yeah, that's always been a good idea in monster movies, right? Alright, that's enough plot, because Lord knows these movies aren't really about the plot. So now that we've kept up with the Joneses, it is now time to see why this film works so well with the MST3K formula. Here's a hint, it's not just because it's bad, but the reasons why it's bad. Let's start at the best place to start, the very beginning.
Oh, I'm being punished for something. I know I am. What could I have done? I didn't ask to see this movie!
The opening credits in this film are just a poorly lit area with a bunch of what is later to be revealed as dead cavemen. There's a bunch of smoke, too. What I assume the directors think is great foreshadowing, these credits are essentially just a foggy mess. Also, these corpses aren't unsettling, they're just weird.
Welcome to the crypt! We've dug something up for you! Why not stick around and watch Dream On? It's the best show on TV! Kill me.
The next thing, which we'll talk about in most of these Mitchy Science Theater episodes, is the acting. Of course, plot is not the only thing that brings down a cruddy movie. Usually acting has something to do with these films being considered the worst of all time. One positive about the acting is that Richard Kiel is pretty good as Eegah. He portrays a giant, sluggish, dumb monster really well, and now that I'm replaying this thought in my head, I am unsure if this is a backhanded compliment or not. It's not for Boris Karloff, so maybe it's fine for Richard Kiel too. Richard Kiel is the exception to the rule of bad actors, however. Every other character is portrayed like a blister on the heel of your foot. It's pretty wretched. I will say one really funny moment is when Roxy hits Eegah with a car. It looks like he was just tapped and then laid down. Archie Hall Jr. is one of the most wretched performances in this entire film. He plays his stereotypical whiny boyfriend character, and he spends most of the movie whining, and then the rest of the movie being essentially useless. He does not contribute anything to the film, minus some musical numbers, seeing as how Archie Hall Jr. is a musician. Were these songs any good? Absolutely not. The musical numbers in this movie are very poorly sung, and there is nothing special about them. Very bland pieces of music with some very unbearable acting and singing to back them up. The most satisfying part of this film was when Archie gets punched.
Yes! 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 Yes!
He's resting comfortably now.
Yes!
And there was much rejoicing.
And let's talk about Roxy. Man, is she another one. Just listen to this laugh.
I think she's in pain.
Put a wallet under her tongue.
I think in general, she spends majority of the film being a typical damsel in distress, but she does not surpass that stereotype. That is all the character is, and she does not add any depth to it. I mean, I was not expecting her to show depth to begin with, but I wish it would have been more than this.
Stop saying we. Nobody says we.
The final thing in the acting category I would like to talk about is Arch Hall Sr. His role as Roxy's father seems innocent enough, right? Well, all the scenes with her and him in it seem, like a different kind of chemistry. Not father and daughter, no. The whole thing is just very uncomfortable, to say the least. There was even a moment where Roxy shaves her father. That's obviously not something a daughter just does to her father in a normal situation. I shudder thinking about it. Well, now it is time to give this film a little bit of credit, but not too much because we don't want to give the writers big heads. This movie does not have a plot problem like other B movies. The plot makes sense from beginning to end. There is no problem there. However, two moments I found a little silly was when looking at hieroglyphics made by Eegah, Roxy can identify a hieroglyphic of herself in her car, despite it not looking anything like her. There's also a moment where they use strange science logic to explain that Eegah has still been living. Let us say that sulfur kept him alive. I am not sure that sulfur has the power of immortality. But my point is, this film is not plagued with an all-over-the-place plot. It has a simple monster movie, B-movie plot archetype. It's incredibly linear, and for a film on MST3K, that is something to at least commemorate. But enough about Eegah. Let's walk the dinosaur and talk about the host segments for this episode. I always found the Joel era host segments to be good fun. There are absolutely some bad or mediocre ones because nobody's perfect, but this episode does not see any of those. This episode is all gems for sure, from start to finish. As always, your time is valuable, and an episode of MST3K is long, so I'll give it a rating of watch it or skip it. This episode opens with Servo freezing Crow to absolute 0 degrees Kelvin. Yeah, I know.
Wait a minute, you can't do that. If you go to absolute zero, there'll be no molecular motion. It'll start a chain reaction and kill us all.
Who doesn't know that? And yes, it goes as well as you could expect. Crow falls apart. I just love when the characters are in an environment where they're fostered to grow. This moment is a typical the bots are doing something crazy moment. And those moments are always great as it gives the characters more time to be themselves. After the madness, they get on with the Invention Exchange. Joel presents an interesting concept, the instrument that was used to make the incidental music for the Beverly Hillbillies, the Porkerina. This is an interesting and humorous invention, and it is nice to see all three of them rock out, or rather pig out together. Dr. Forrester had something else in mind. He drained all of TV's Frank's blood.
You what? You can't do that!
Yes, he drained his blood and replaced it with radiator fluid. Supposedly a better energy source, but it's not looking too promising. Of course, as always, sketches where Dr. Forrester tortures TV's Frank are fun, because that's what the two do best in terms of character dynamics. This odd couple relationship between the two is strengthened when Dr. Forrester does something like this to Frank. Yes, it's a play on the same joke that goes on between the two. Dr. Forrester harms Frank, the cycle continues. However, the various ways in which Dr. Forrester harms Frank are always creative, and the charisma between the two actors, and their ability not to laugh, which is not always that easy for the two of them, is very strong. These two will always be my favorite Mads. They're the perfect duo. The entirety of this opening gets a watch it for me. Now throughout this episode, you really will be seeing host segments that cement this father-son relationship between Joel and the bots. The opening certainly did, and now the second host segment also does. While Joel is tailoring clothes for Crow, they all talk about what hell means to them. Joel explains that hell works better on smaller levels.
I don't mind telling you guys, The day this country went self-service was the day that hell began to bubble up and flood the earth.
Oh, I hate to burst your bubble, Joel, but what about the bubonic plague, World War, Stalin?
Well, come on, those are all big things. You know, hell works better when it's a lot more subtle.
This sketch is just them talking with various punchlines to what hell could be. But my praise isn't even on the jokes, while they are humorous. This is about the characters living in this space naturally. One thing I feel about the sci-fi era is that characters did not get enough chances to just live in the space. However, they are just talking. Everything from Crow saying ouch to the needles to Tom Servo having a pincushion in place of his globe. And Joel nodding while listening. It's just so wholesome and is my idea of what makes Mystery Science Theater 3000 so special. Joel and his personal hell get to watch it from me. Of course, sometimes though you need something a little outlandish. That's where the next host segment comes in. In this host segment, the bots make Joel's face look like Arch Hall Jr. with a machine. This is a pretty hilarious and ludicrous idea. I also like Gypsy's staging here. They use her really well. The use of her character is often limited to her massive size. However, when they find perfect uses and places for her, she really can shine, and this is a good example of that. Her tubing being used to hold a gas mask to Joel's face is perfect, and I like how while she's standing behind the table, her tubing comes around in front. It's a good optical illusion. Funny concept and great execution, I give this host segment the rating of watch it. The next host segment is very self-aware. This host segment is a deep delve into film and television in the 60s and parental figures.
You know, you're right, Joel. Now that I think of it, the families on TV back then were mostly run by widowers. I mean, think of it, guys. The Andy Griffith Show, Mayberry RFD, Courtship of Eddie's Father, Oh, My Three Sons, Flipper, even the Beverly Hillbillies. The list goes on and on.
Yeah, the only normal family back then was the Munsters.
Essentially, it leads down the rabbit hole and they realize, wait a minute, we don't have a mother. All of this happens while they're simply just making Jiffy Pop popcorn. This is another one of those host segments that is just the cast going about their day and having a conversation while it's happening. I like how they aren't just talking, but they're also living in the space while talking. In this case, it was popcorn. Earlier, it was tailoring. Both times, it was developing the characters and the place they live in using little tiny details. I also enjoy how these characters can casually relate the sketch to the film. Because their interactions and setting are so casual, the punchlines related to the movie do not ever feel forced, due to it seeming like something they would just talk about after watching the parts of the movie. The bots' existential crisis get to watch it from me. Finally, we get to the closing host segment, which just wraps things up in a little neat bow. Crow and Tom, after being subjected to being uncomfortable for a whole hour, are now showering off the dirt from this viewing experience while Joel reads the fan letter. As for Frank, he wants his blood back.
Say, do you think maybe I could possibly get my blood back, please?
Oh, you want your blood back? Fine. Baby, I'll put your blood back in. I'll pour it right back in. Come on, Frank.
No, you know what? I don't even want it anymore. You take it. You take it.
No, I insist.
No,
you have
you take
your
it.
precious blood. Here,
You
baby.
take it, you big stupidity bully blood.
Him and Dr. Forrester bicker, and then Frank, as always, pushes the button. Frank and Dr. F really do behave like an old married couple in a really sadistic way. Frank and Dr. F also feel like really lived-in characters in a really lived-in setting thanks to the writing and chemistry of the actors in this era of the show. You've watched this far. Why would you not watch the closing host segment? Either way, I give it a watch it, as I always love the fan mail and I also love the moments like these with Frank and Dr. F. Now that the host segments are done, let's take a little peek into the theater and see what's good. So as for in-theater action, there really isn't much to talk about here. In this episode, it's mostly riffs, and they are amazing riffs at that. This is an incredibly funny episode. One thing of note, however, is that this episode is the origin of a running gag throughout the series.
Watch out for snakes.
Yes, it is the origin of our favorite out-of-the-blue line. And now, my friends, for your viewing pleasure, every time they say watch out for snakes as a riff in this single episode.
Watch out for snakes. Watch out for snakes. Oh, would the gentleman by the side of the pool please just continue the song? And watch out for snakes. See? I told you so. Watch out for snakes. Watch out for snakes. Watch out for snakes.
Yes, it is a fun running gag indeed, and is a big one among fans. They even named a whole tour after it. Now it is time for my top 25 riffs in no particular order. Now these were difficult to narrow down, let me tell you. I had around 60 to 70 written down in my notes, and majority of them made me belly laugh. This episode is funny from beginning to end. So after a lot of thought and sacrifice, here are my top 25 riffs in no particular order.
Focus. It focuses, please. Hello, the smokers over. Focus.
Better go back to the car.
No, he's my giant.
Holy cow, he was standing right here watching us.
Playing bass.
Looks like I got a flat tire here.
Ouch, my hand!
Oh, it's a Tampax commercial. Like a Cabbage Patch Elvis.
Ooh, look! She's dressed for a Benny Hill audition. Johnny Quest.
The helicopter blew a gasket or something. He won't be able to pick Dad up.
I pledge allegiance.
Yes.
To your dad.
No problem. We'll get to do.
Stop saying we. Nobody says we. Oh, I can see it coming. A tragic accident. Come on. Yes. Oh, damn. Born free. He is this close to being Dom DeLuise.
You didn't come out here alone, did you?
No.
Tish, that's
Tom's
French.
with me.
We'll put lime and coconut drink all up.
What are they doing?
They're telling secrets, honey.
Good morning. We've talked the whole night through.
Oh, please become Sweeney Todd. Please become the Demon Barber of Fleet Street Well right now.
Eegah shaka, Eegah,
I can't stop this feeling.
Going through body at the county jail.
I like Ike.
Bill Clinton likes.
Oh, you
Pretty chitty bang bang, pretty chitty bang bang, we love you.
Revisiting Eegah is always a blast. This is a fan favorite for a reason, as the film is iconic and the host segments are incredible. As I mentioned before, this episode is a good one for beginners, because the movie is not necessarily insufferable, and it is funny from beginning to end. From the host segments all being quality and showing a good representation of Dr. F and Frank, and Joel and the bots and their character dynamics. The characters really shine through. This is one of those episodes of MST3K that represents the entire show incredibly. MST3K is not just about the movies. While that is the focus, and in later seasons it really does become the focus, it is also about the personalities of these characters delivering these riffs. The mad scientists who shot Joel in space are just as important as Joel himself and should be written to be equally as endearing. This episode satisfies the needs to have a good balance between the two mediums. It is not only one of the best episodes of the Joel era, but it is also one of the best episodes of the entire show. Period. It's a classic and I will definitely be watching it many more times. I give this episode a rating of watch it. Now that I have a total of 2 episodes, I can start ranking them. So it's incredibly close, but I would have to rank Eegah over Hobgoblins. Eegah is an S rank and Hobgoblins gets an S rank, but I would place Eegah higher because Hobgoblins has one weak link host segment in it. Oh man, this is so hard. It's like choosing which of your children you like better. It's not easy, and I'm tired. I am going to go take a nap because I need it. Well, thank you everyone for watching. I love sharing the love of MST3K with all of you, and I hope this series is helping you out a bit with your choice of episodes. Join me next time when I look at an episode with a fun twist. Season 6, Episode 11, The Last of the Wild Horses. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Mitchy Science Theater, and thank you so much for tuning in. Each and every one of you that are watching, you are completely breathtaking. Anywho, push the button, Quattro.